From London, we're joined by the Latin American political analyst Javier Farge. Javier, we say that the incumbent president Hernandez is in the lead over Nasrallah, but that wasn't the case a few days ago. Is something suspicious happening?
Something very suspicious is happening. After half of the votes cast had been counted, Mr. Nasrallah had a 5-point lead, and the tendency until that moment was the 5-point lead. Suddenly, there was a suspension on the counting of the votes cast. Then suddenly, Mr. Hernandez came up with an advantage, something that the opposition does not accept. Now, the exit polls and all the investigations after the election suggest that Mr. Nasrallah is ahead of the in the race against the incumbent president. So that is why the opposition has called for protests, because they believe that this change is impossible, because the tendency was always these 5 points. And in Latin America, experience in Latin American elections, these tendencies tend to remain until the end of the votes. We had elections in Peru not long ago. We had the same situation because of the way the votes are counted in Latin American countries and the way exit polls operate. So there is something not quite right, because there was a suspension of the counting of the votes just after around 70%, after 70% of the votes had been counted, and suddenly Mr. Hernandez turns up to be the favorite here. That's why Mr. Nasrallah, who's promised protests for the next 2 years, quote unquote, decided that this fraud here and something has to be done, and he wants a recount, something that the Electoral Commission seems to be delaying. And this declaration of a state of siege and curfew is going to make it even more difficult for this count to happen.
The Electoral Commission only has 2.7 million votes to count. The election was last Sunday. Historically, right, is there a problem with Honduran democracy?
Oh, there is a problem. Since the June 2009 coup against President Zelaya, consecutive governments have used the military, to sort of keep power, even though they've been elected, and they have a hardline position in relation to this. No wonder the government has declared a state of emergency and the military are in charge. But there's always been this situation where suddenly you have a center-left movement emerging in the Honduran sort of, political landscape, which put in peril the conservative agenda of Mr. Hernandez. And many people believe, rightly or wrongly, the only time will tell, that they want to keep in power. And this also, we have to be very clear that it's also one of the first tests of Mr. Donald Trump's influence in Latin America. Mr. Hernandez is an ally of the United States, in which case the United States would need Honduras, which is a country ravished with violence, with criminal violence, and a lot of sort of economic problems. They need to have some control within Central America. So in this respect, it is important for the United States, for Mr. Hernandez to win. I've not said that the U.S. is interfering in this, but it would be in the interest of President Trump that Mr. Hernandez remains in power, and they do not want another center-left government like they have in Nicaragua in Central America, which is a region extremely important for the strategic interests of Latin America from the United States.
Javier Farge, we appreciate the analysis. Thank you for joining us on TRT World.